Now, people that are looking into NetSuite and looking for different modules or even expanding their footprint on NetSuite to have more automation, one of those modules that they're going to be starting to look at is something related to invoice reminders and being able to do better collections. And one of those is the Dunning module by NetSuite. And there's times where it makes sense and times where it doesn't make sense because there's multiple ways to do AR collections out of NetSuite. And I'm hoping to educate people a little bit between the two options and kind of share my perspective on this topic. So that's my plan and to go into it. And then you can kind of prod and ask questions throughout too. But mostly it's just to provide a little bit of education. NetSuite has many different modules. It also has building blocks to leverage. And this is an important thing to know is there's a number of building blocks it has to modify and optimize NetSuite. One of those, well, a handful of those building blocks are there's something called custom records, which are like, think of them as like custom spreadsheets. There are fields, custom fields that you can configure, safe searches, which is like SQL queries or like running like a VLOOKUP function on Excel and doing different types of reporting. You can build tables. It's like filtering in a spreadsheet. Think of it like that way. Save searches. There's also workflows, which are if then statements, scripting functionality, which is the same as workflows, but in a coded format that allows you to take it to the coded level. That's typically needed when there's complex logic between multiple records and you're looking up multiple different records and pulling that information together into to perform an action or on the transaction line. So you've got the main body of an invoice, let's say, and then the individual transaction lines. If you're trying to run logic on the transaction line level, usually scripts start to make sense to go that approach. And these are just some of the building blocks. There's a couple other pieces, advanced PDFs, which are your PDF print of a record. So if you were to go to an invoice, print that invoice, you'll see some form of PDF. Those are modifiable down to the HTML level. And related to PDFs are the email templates. So imagine that same PDF template print, but printing within the body of an email. So rather than clicking the attachment, which is the PDF template, you just see all the invoice information and buttons within the email itself. Now, this is the foundation of knowledge that actually most NetSuite modules are built on these building blocks. And Dunning module is one of those modules. But there's also ways to do this multiple functionalities of the Dunning module using these building blocks by yourself. And we have decided to use the building blocks internally on our own NetSuite environment. And there's customers that maybe already purchased Dunning or just looking into it. The nice thing about the Dunning module is it has established workflows and automations that are a little bit more configurable, where you can say, all right, I'm going to follow up with this email template. And there's some pre-established email templates that say, after 15 days of overdue on the invoice, send this email. Then after 25 days, send this other email template. And it's just a little bit easier to configure the module than to utilize the building blocks. And you use save searches to query it to say, all right, the save search may say, set the criteria of all the invoices that are unpaid status and are overdue by 1 day. Well, those all need to get this email template. So you can see what I mean, how these are the building blocks that the Dunning module leverages and many other modules use in the first place. The main benefit to the module is that those building blocks are already established to just be configured. The con to it is that you have to pay additional Oracle licensing and there's still some install time to it. Um, so there's one other approach to take, which is utilizing custom workflows or scripts, building your own PDF templates and email templates. These take more professional services, which is what Anchor Group primarily offers, is implementation of modules and implementing the building blocks. The pro is that it's the most flexible and that you're not paying a recurring fee. The con is that you are paying a little bit more on the front end for all the work to put all together all the email templates and PDF templates if those are needed and the additional logic and conditional formatting. But I will say this, I think that the custom workflow and that building block approach makes most sense for very simplistic email templates that you're just giving them reminders via a text and you're not designing it and it's a simple workflow. In fact, you can configure that in roughly the same amount of time as configuring the Dunning module. So that's a little bit about the Dunning module and what it's intended for and the different building blocks.
Caleb, can I ask a question about some of the differences between the two?
Yeah.
From a timeline perspective, how much faster is it going to be to spin up the Dunning module versus going the custom workflow route?
Probably about 2 weeks faster to go with the Dunning approach because it's more just having an initial kickoff, discussing your configuration needs, configuring it, making some small tweaks, um, going through user acceptance testing, training, and production deployment. These are ERP processes. So you want to figure out a really good deployment flow with the Dunning module. It's not like it takes a long time in weeks wise. It's just you like to give yourself timeline. I normally recommend 2 to 4 weeks to implement really any easy module like the Dunning module, but it doesn't take more than a week of work, that's for sure, to implement the whole module. You'd have to be doing some pretty massive customizations to the email templates and workflows, and at that stage, you might as well go custom.
And then a follow-up question to that, what are some examples of complex scenarios you've seen, whether it's through the Dunning module or through a complex workflow, and kind of what should companies be thinking about as variables or elements within their Dunning process?
Yeah, I can give a few examples that may not apply to everybody but at least illustrate it a bit. There's companies that have many, many subsidiaries in NetSuite, and each of those subsidiaries sometimes have their own PDF templates and their own language and just nuances between the different business entities. And as such, you would have different workflows that would maybe different follow-up sequences. If one industry is maybe one subsidiary is like a software business and the other is a services and the other is a products business. These might have very different types of sequences and logic and language to describe when they need to pay and why and what will happen. A software one, for instance, might say you have if you don't pay by this date, the connection of your service will disconnect and it won't work anymore, where that doesn't really apply for the product. They've already received the product, but a product one might say, hey, this is going to go to collections if you don't pay it in time. Or it's incurring additional interest if you're not paying in time. That's more common in the service space. So there's different verbiage that you might have on each email template. And some email templates might need the logic to attach the invoice again. And each invoice template might want a different layout depending on the industry. So I'd say the variation occurs when you're doing very different product lines or business units that need a different sequence. But that is not most companies. Most companies have one primary structure and flow. And that's why I do think that most companies fit into the custom workflow approach and scripting approach, kind of as
Sounds
a
good and
rough rule
makes
of thumb.
sense.
Yeah. So it's really as simple as that. Hopefully that gives you a just some ideas on how I think about Dunning module and workflows and what you might need. If timeline is an issue, you can get the module. Sometimes that's a major the thing for someone to resolve quickly. It makes sense, but there's a lot of flexibility in either approach. It just determines the specific approach you want to take. But hopefully that helps. Feel free to reach out to us if you want us to implement the Dunning module or any other of those custom building blocks.